Welcome to OLC40. This is term 1A. This is class 3. This is tomorrow's class that we're kind of recording ahead of time. We are still on lesson 1 and we are going to be working on the readings and the practice for key question number 1. And this is Jillian Percy. Here are all the ways for you to contact me. If you want to talk to me while I'm in the studio, 1-800-465-7144. Keep in mind that when you do that, it will be broadcast on the air just like what I say will be broadcast on the air, and it will be saved and recorded and loaded onto YouTube with the class. If you want to talk to me when I'm not on the air, the office number is 1-800-667-3703, and my extension is 2211. My main email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca, and my alternate email is jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. My Facebook is capital G, capital P-E-R-C-Y, space, capital W-A-H-S-A. My YouTube is the same, and there is a second YouTube channel, which is the School Wassa Distance Education YouTube channel. So this class should be found on either one of those channels, okay? Okay, the question I get most often is, how do I hand in an assignment? And there are so many ways to hand in assignments because we try to be flexible. First of all, if there is a learning center in your community and you have a DEC, which is the person in charge of the learning center, ask them to scan it and send it to me, and you hang on to your originals because you'll need them later on in the course. You can fax things. We do have a fax number, 1-800-463-7852. But it doesn't run very often, so we normally just kind of leave it off in a sleep mode. So let me know if you're planning to fax something so that I can turn it on. That's all. You can also scan it yourself using a scanner app on your phone, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. You can mail it to me, but I really discourage people from doing that. It's just so easy for things to get lost, and it takes a long time. And then once it gets to me, it's in my marking pile. And I do my marking pile normally by when it arrived, so it may take a while for you to get back to things. Some people who are using the Google Docs to do their assignments, they share documents with me through Google Files. Other people hand in assignments by taking a photograph of their assignment. That's really common, especially if people handwrote something. And then you can send those photographs to me through Facebook or email. Email is a little bit easier if it's a longer one. Keep in mind when you're doing the photograph, it has to be really clear. It can't be blurry because I won't be able to read it. Generally, if you write your assignments in pen rather than pencil, it's dark enough for me to read. Make sure your phone is exactly parallel to your assignment so the writing doesn't get distorted. You don't want to have a bunch of shadows on it or to have it in front of a bright light so part of it gets whited out. Don't just click the share button, okay? When you do that, it will come up as an odd size on my computer and I have to play with it for a while to get it to print, which is fine for one page, but sometimes people are handing me in 40 pages worth of work and that will take me a really long time to do. Also, don't just cut and paste it into the body of the email. Instead, save it as a file and then attach it into the email. So if you'll see your phone, it'll say send as attachment, select that one, okay? It doesn't make anything difference for you, it's just one button versus another, but it makes all the difference in the world for me. Okay. If you want to use a scanner app, they're super simple to use. It's not really any harder than using your camera, basically. I use Adobe Scan. It's free. It's easy to download. Once you've got it downloaded, you open it up. You take a picture. You can see there's like little blue dots and a little lines. You can see where you want your borders. Maybe there's something on the edge that you don't want. If you have another page to scan, you keep on doing that over and over until you've got all the pages done for that one assignment. Okay. Hit continue. Now it will let you preview it. If something came up blurry or part of it got chopped off, now is your chance to kind of go through and fix that. Save the PDF, give it a name. I normally give it a name of like the course plus the assignment, like OLC40 assignment number 1. Then you can save it wherever you want. You can have Google Drive will be on your phone, Dropbox, whatever you save things in, then send it to me as an email, okay? That provides the best quality photograph. It's much better than your phone. The one thing is sometimes people will do their work in a notebook and they'll do like 2 pages at once. Don't take a picture of 2 pages at once. Only take a picture of 1 page. I find that when people take 2 pictures at once, for me to be able to zoom it up enough to be able to read it, it loses all the resolution. It becomes so pixelated that I can't really read the words. So only take one picture at a time, okay? Okay, so we were beginning to talk about grammar, which I know is not everybody's favorite topic, but I find if we don't start here, then when I'm trying to explain why there's problems with people's writing, we don't have a common vocabulary. So I find if we talk and I get some concepts across, then when I say, hey, there was a problem with your verbs or there was a problem with your subject, it makes more sense, right? This is the kind of thing that people should have been taught in school, but I also know a lot of teachers don't like teaching grammar because they also think it's boring. So I'm never sure how much of this stuff people have already read about, okay? So action verbs are words like jump, run, dance, write, read, dream, sleep, push, fall. That's one type of verb. Second type of verb, state of being verbs. Those are all verbs that are the conjugations of literally the verb to be, which is one of those weird verbs in English that sort of changes what regardless of what's in front of it. So we've got I am, you are, he, she, or it uses is, we are, you are, and they are. That's all for present tense. But if we're talking about the past, we change it again. I was, you were, he, she, or it was, we were, you were, they were. And then if we're talking about the future, we say will be. Okay? Those are really important because not only do people not always recognize them because they don't sound like an action, which they aren't, they're more when you're describing what something is like we are cold, you are kind. So it's not really describing an action, it's sort of describing what that person's condition is or their state is. But also, these kind of state and being verbs can get pushed together with action verbs to create verb phrases. We sometimes call these helping verbs or linking verbs. There's more than just the state of being verbs, but these are the common ones. And basically, it tells you more information about the action. Sometimes it can tell you whether an action happened in the past, present, or future. Things like was, were, had, or has show you what happened in the past. Things like will be in front of a word, like I will be jumping, is going to show you that's going to happen in the future. And then words like are and is show you that the action is happening right now. Helping verbs might also show the possibility of an action happening. Things like could jump, would write, should pay, may, might, shall, can, will, must, or need. Those are all a very special type of helping verbs. So when you see those words, they aren't really actions, but they are a special type of a verb. Okay? So I don't know if you are aware of this, but sentences in any language follow common patterns. We talked about this a little bit the other day. The most common basic sentence pattern is basically just a subject plus a verb. So some examples below, things like birds fly, dogs growl, cats meow, birds are flying, eggs may have broken. And you can see the part that's underlined, that is the verb. And like we talked about before, in English, the main verb in a sentence is going to come right after the subject. So who is doing the verb comes first, and then what the verb is, right? It can be a what, it could be a building, right? The building falls, the car crashes. It doesn't have to be a who, obviously. Okay, so throughout the book, we've talked about this, we've got support questions, and the support questions are just a chance for you to practice. And I know some people might be tempted to skip them, but I really encourage you to try them because it gives you a good idea as to whether you understand the material. If you do these support questions and then you check at the back of the unit and see, oh yeah, I got that right, well then you know you're fine. You'll probably do great with the key question. But if you check those support questions, you're like, wait, I got these all wrong, call me. Let me know so that I can help you understand the concept. Because there's no point going forward and doing the key question if you didn't understand the support question. So they aren't for marks so much as they are a way for you to self-assess whether you understand what's being taught. There's one or two assignments later on in Unit 2 where I have people do like a brainstorming thing and like a rough copy, and I want them. But for the most part, you don't need to worry about this is for you, but I really do encourage you, if you're going to get the most out of this course, to do those questions. So, the house was old. Okay, so now we're not talking about verbs, we're talking about the subject. What is the subject? Well, if you remember, a subject is a noun or a pronoun. So the house was old. House is your subject. He gave a present. Okay, he is our subject. Now, why couldn't it be present? Well, simply, the present isn't doing anything, right? He is the person giving something. The present is just kind of an inanimate object that got given. The way we use it in English, we sometimes say it received the action rather than it did the action. The hammer was broken. Well, that one's pretty simple because there's really only one noun in that sentence. The hammer is our subject. It was cold. Okay, now that one is tricky. I have a lot of people want to use the word cold just because they recognize it. But in actual fact, it is a pronoun, and that is acting as the subject in this sentence, the word it. Here is my mom. Now here's another one where people want to tell me mom, and I get it because mom is a person. But mom isn't the one in front of the verb. Is my verb. The word in front of the verb is here. So here is another, I think it's an indefinite pronoun, I believe. And it is the one doing the subject or doing the action essentially, okay? So, part 2. For this one, underline the verb or the verb phrase in each sentence below. Okay, it was cold. Well, here we already used it for the subject, so that means was cold is our verb phrase. The moose bellowed. Okay, bellowed is clearly our verb. He is pouring the coffee. Now, I wouldn't want to do just pouring, and I wouldn't want to do just is, because it's both of them together. They're both the verb phrase, right? They're working together. A doctor could fix that arm. Okay, same thing. It's not just fix and it's not just could, it's both of them together. Could fix. Sorry if I can make that a little smaller there. She will be arriving today. Okay, so what part of that is the verb? That one actually has like 3 verbs working together. Will be tells you it's in the future, and arriving tells you what action is going to happen in the future. So that is your verb phrase. Oh, sorry. Sometimes when I move things from Word documents over to Canvas or Canva, it undoes my numbering. My apologies there. Look at the sentences below. Underline all the sentences that are using action verbs. Okay. The football player threw the ball. Okay, so this is for the whole sentence. I don't know if it'll... Oh yeah, it gets too big. So we'll just kind of put 2 together. That's underlined, okay guys? The whole sentence. It was hot yesterday. There's no action verb in there, so I'm not going to underline it. The manager drove everybody home. Okay, so drove is definitely an action word, so I would underline the whole sentence. They were uncomfortable. Were is one of those state of being verbs. I don't need to underline it. Okay. Look at the sentences below. Underline all of the sentences that are using state of being verbs. And again, I'm sorry, I know this number is off. I think it's actually at 4 right now, but if it doesn't match up, look for where the words match, okay? Here is your present. Okay, so that is definitely a state of being verb, and it's that little tiny one, is. Let me see if I can make it tiny, tiny. There we go. She dreamed peacefully. Dreamed is not a state of being verb, so I'm not going to underline that. That teacher was wrong. Okay, so was is definitely a state of being verb. So I actually need to do the whole sentence, so my apologies. I forgot. Here we go. Okay. I am happy. Am is another state of being verb, so I would underline that one as well. Okay. And then I think that this should be a 5 if I still have the numbers right in my head. Look at the sentences below. In each sentence, underline the helping verbs, but not the action verbs. So one thing to keep in mind in English is the helping verbs are going to come in front of the action verb. So if you're able to identify the action verb, you can often very easily identify the helping verbs. Okay, she is running fast. Well, running is my action. So is my helping verb. He could lose the race. So lose is my action word, and could is my helping verb. I had been searching for you all night. Okay, well there's searching, and so I can see the word being, so I'm going to do that. Now, does anyone else see a problem? Basically, I've not put had as well. Had is also a helping verb. So if I had forgotten that, I would have got partial marks because I would have gotten part right, part wrong. Okay? So I need both those to get the correct marks. You should have been waiting for me. Okay, here's another one where there's more than one. Waiting is my action verb. And being, well, obviously being is a state of being verb. But I also have should and have. And I would want to underline those as well. It can be one big long line. Just make it clear where it ends. Occasionally I'll have people, let me see where they'll like do a big long line and I can't tell what part they've included. Make it really crisp and clear so it stops at the break of the word, okay? Okay, so we're moving on to talk about complete or incomplete sentences. This is really, really important. This is a major concept of the course. It is one of the things I look for every single time I read any piece of writing that you hand to me, or even when you're doing answers for your reading, because I want everybody to get into the habit where they're just automatically writing incomplete sentences. It becomes so much easier when you're writing if it becomes an automatic thing. So remember that the three criteria for a complete sentence is it must have a subject, it must have a verb, and it must express a complete thought, like all by its own. So having said that, when we're just talking to people, we use incomplete thoughts all the time. We call that conversational in English. So here's a typical conversation. Jeff says, "What are you doing?" And Dan answers, "Fixing the car." Jeff says, "How's it going?" "Not quite done." Now, in this, Jeff is asking questions that are complete sentences. What are you doing is complete. How is it going is complete. Dan is answering in incomplete sentences. So when he said fixing the car, technically a complete sentence would be I am fixing the car. However, in everyday conversations, it's really obvious that Dan is the subject doing it, so it's considered fine to drop the word. But in academic or written English, particularly because you're not standing there talking to the person, it's not considered acceptable. It's not always as obvious who the subject is. I also want to point out, here he said fixing the car. When I went to turn it into a complete sentence, I not only had to add the subject I, but I also had to add a little helper verb. I am fixing the car. That's because I fixing the car doesn't make sense. So when people are writing incomplete sentences, often the verb isn't quite right either. So pay attention when you add the subject because that will often change as well, which is another reason why it's a good idea to get out of the habit of it for written English. Now, in other conversations, the speaker might be only mentioning the subject, and maybe they might leave out the actions if it's obvious from the conversation. So here's an example of a conversation where that part is really obvious. Brenda says, "Who are you going to the dance with?" And Jesse says, "Trevor." Brenda says, "I'm going with David. We were thinking of grabbing a bit to eat afterwards. You want to go to McDonald's or Subway?" Subway, for sure. So in this one, Brenda is asking full complete sentences, but Jesse is only stating the subject, mainly because the way Brenda has phrased the question, the actions are already understood. And again, that's fine in an everyday conversation or even like a Facebook message back and forth, but it's not considered appropriate in school writing. So occasionally I'll find when people are writing like a paragraph that's all about themselves, like if I say, "What did you do this summer?" They'll often put the word I in the very first sentence, and then they just kind of like forget to use it in the rest of the sentences. I think the idea is that, well, you get it, you assume that it's I. And I do get it, but remember how we pointed out that it does change what kind of verb you use? And also, the longer the piece of writing it is, I find the harder it becomes to understand because you're constantly having to sort of pull your attention back to the beginning to remember who's talking. Okay? So in academic writing, which is what we're doing here, it is important to always include the subject in every single sentence, even if it is the same subject as you had in the previous sentence. Okay? So here's an example of that type of paragraph where the subject just got left off. And so other than the first sentence, a lot of these sentences are incomplete. I love summer. Swimming in the creek with friends, paddling the canoe along the shore, going blueberry picking with my mom, playing baseball with all my friends. It is my favorite time of year. So basically only I love summer and it is my favorite time of year is a complete sentence. So underneath, I have rewritten it. I've added a subject, but you can see I've had to often add additional words or additional verbs to make it sound right. And I don't want it to say I love, love, love over and over again. I want to use different words. So here it's become I love summer. I enjoy swimming in the creek with friends. I love paddling the canoe along the shore. I like going blueberry picking with my mom. I especially love playing baseball with all my friends. Now, the reason I added especially was because you don't want your sentences to all sound alike and very repetitive. You want the variety. It's just more pleasant to the ear, okay? So this is not only easier to understand, but it actually gives us more information because we have a better idea of what part they like best and what part they like the least. Whereas that first paragraph just didn't have all that information. So that's another reason why writing in a complete sentence kind of ends up forcing you to give more details, which usually creates better writing. All right, there are four main types of sentences, okay? In the majority of the sentences we've been talking about so far, we've been talking about the most common type, which is a statement. And it's telling you a fact, or it's giving a description, or it's giving you an opinion. These are sometimes called a declarative sentence because basically they're declaring something. Those types of sentences must end in a period. Then we have exclamatory sentences. Those are sentences that show strong emotion. For example, I hate you, or help, or we won. Those are all like different emotions. These continue to follow the same basic sentence word pattern as we've been discussing, subject, verb, and then whatever other things follow. These sentences must end with an exclamation point, okay? So the pattern hasn't changed for these two, but the emotion has changed. That's the main thing that's changed. Then we have imperative sentences. These are when we want to give a command or give instructions. For example, I might say to somebody, oh, mix the flour and water together. Place the milk in the fridge. Get out of here. In these sentences, it's always assumed that the subject is you, that you're talking to somebody specific. It's as if I said, you mix the flour and water. But the subject isn't written, it's just assumed. So that's one sort of a pattern difference between imperative sentences and declarative sentences. Now, these can end with a period. They can also end in an exclamation point if there's a strong emotion. The thing that makes it different, it makes it not an exclamatory sentence, is exclamatory sentences will follow subject verb. They won't drop the subject. That's the main difference there. Okay, and then we have interrogative sentences, which basically means they're asking a question. And there are two main types of question styles. There's more than that, but we're just going to stick with that to start. Both styles are going to end with a question mark. First of all, are questions that begin with the 5 W's and the H. Who, what, where, why, when, or how. These 6 words are called interrogative pronouns. And because they're a pronoun, they count as the subject of the sentence. So they're still following that declarative sentence pattern that we've been studying. It doesn't always sound like it, right? Like, when was the party? But if you look at it, when is your pronoun, so it's your subject, was is your verb, and then you have the other information. But there's also a style called like an inverted question style. And in that style, the subject and the verb trade places, or they're inverted, okay? A typical statement might be, I can go to the movies. But if I wanted to turn that into a question, I would say, can I go to the movies? And you can see the I and the can have switched places. In writing, we use a question mark. In oral speech, we make our voice go up. So I can go to the movies, my voice stays the same. Can I go to the movies? My voice goes up to show that a question is being asked. Okay, so here's a support question. We're going to read the sentences below and decide what type of sentence it is. Underline the correct choice for each one. Today was a sunny day. Is that declarative, imperative, exclamatory, or interrogative? That is, declarative. Okay. Do the dishes before you leave. Are they declaring something? Are they imperative, commanding something? Are they excited, or are they asking a question? For this one, it is imperative. They're basically giving you a command or an instruction. Okay? Imperatives will often sound bossy. How is the new job going? Okay, well, right away you see your question mark. That's a hint that it is an interrogative question. Interrogative, sorry, I'm saying that slightly wrong. My house is on fire. Okay, well, there's an exclamation point, which means it is probably exclamatory. Okay, I think pizza is the best dinner. Okay, someone's saying their opinion here, but it's still basically a declarative sentence, right? It's still considered a fact. It's a fact about their opinion, basically. Let go of me. Okay, now this one is tricky. It sounds like a command, but there is an exclamation point. So do I consider it an imperative, or do I consider it an exclamatory? I would say it's an imperative because of the sentence pattern, right? They've dropped the subject. If it said, David let go of me, then I would call it exclamatory. But because they've got no subject, that puts it as an imperative, because that's the imperative pattern, is dropping the subject and starting with the verb. I want to go home. Okay, so this is another one where there's an exclamation point. Does it count as an imperative, or does it count as an exclamatory? Well, we do have a subject. We have I. So it's probably not an imperative then. It would be an exclamatory. Okay? All right. And the reason that's important is just to know how to get into the habit of knowing how to punctuate things if you're writing, but also to understand the meaning behind something if you're reading it. Okay? All right, capitalization and punctuation of sentences. Another important difference between oral conversations and writing is that we always use a capital letter at the beginning of a written sentence to make it stand out. We also use end punctuation such as periods, question marks, or exclamation marks that show that a sentence is ended. We just talked about a lot of those, and give information about the purpose or emotion behind the sentences we just discussed. So a period we use when we're talking about a statement, a fact, or an opinion. It can also be used when you are giving a command or instructions, right? Generally, it's considered neutral, and it's probably the most common end punctuation you're going to use. Today is sunny. Question mark, we only use it when we're asking a question. And exclamation mark is whenever you're having a sentence that has excitement or upset. So it can be used with exclamatory sentences. It can also be used with imperative sentences. And we haven't really talked about interjections. Interjections are like sort of one word that has strong emotion, like ouch, no, yeah, help, or stop. So it gets used with interjections as well, which are kind of a special type of exclamatory sentence. Okay, so if you look at the sentences below, they're complete, right? But they don't look 100% like it because they haven't got all the punctuation and capitalization they need. So it's really important in English when you're writing your stuff that you make sure every sentence begins with a capital letter and it needs to end with a period, a question mark, or an exclamation mark as appropriate. It cannot end with a comma. Okay, not in English. So, it is cold outside. What's missing? There should be a capital I for it. She is so mean. What's missing? It should have a period at the end of there, right? I was angry at my brother. What's missing? Well, there's two things missing there. First of all, the I should be a capital I because of the beginning of a sentence. And second of all, there should be a period at the end of the sentence. So the bottom is how they should look. So this is kind of one more aspect of writing a complete sentence, is making sure that you're using punctuation capitalization to help indicate to the reader where sentences begin and where they end. So support question 4. What are 3 things that every sentence needs to be considered complete? Okay, so if I was going to put this in a complete sentence, right, I would start with my subject. 3 things that sentences need to be complete are, what does it need first of all? Subject, verb, and what's the last thing? And to express a complete thought. Okay? If it doesn't quite make sense, if there's things missing, it doesn't usually count as a complete sentence. And I'll show you a little bit later what I mean by that. But why is it okay to use incomplete sentences in our everyday speech, but not in our writing? Okay? So, in everyday speech, right, our conversation will often help supply the missing pieces. Okay? In academic speech, you need to provide all the pieces for the reader, right? The reader doesn't have you in front of them to be able to ask questions, right? Like I could be marking at 10 o'clock at night. I'm not calling you up to find out what you meant. So we have to be really clear. Okay, look at the sentences below and decide whether it is a complete or incomplete sentence. And again, sorry, it keeps changing my little numbers there. Underline the incomplete sentences. So remember that I'm looking for the subject, the verb, and does it express a complete thought? So, sentence A, went fishing in Dad's boat. Is there a subject? Nope, I don't know who went fishing in Dad's boat. It doesn't tell me. So that is an incomplete sentence. So I'm going to move over a line. Me and Sally and her cousin were. Okay, I've got a subject, me and Sally and her cousin. What are they doing? I'm not really sure. There's a verb, were is a verb, but the thought is incomplete. I don't really know what's going on. They were what? Are they fishing? Are they baking? Are they mad? What's happening? I don't know because they haven't completed the sentence. So that one also counts as an incomplete sentence. Mom is great at making pies. Okay, well, mom is my subject, is my verb, and it expresses a complete thought, so I don't need to underline it. My favorite part of winter is. Okay, what's my subject? This whole phrase, my favorite part of winter is my subject. Is my verb, but what's the problem here? It doesn't express a complete thought. Okay, it doesn't make any sense the way it's written, even though it has a verb and a subject. So it needs more. So I've got to underline it. E, after the movie. Is there a subject there? Nope. Is there a verb there? Nope. So that's not even really incomplete sentence. It's just kind of a few words just jumbled together. So it would also count. If I saw that, it's not a full sentence. Walking down the street to the store. Okay, who's doing the walking? I don't know. And it could be a what too. It could be the dog was walking down the street to the store. I don't know because they haven't told me. So that means it's an incomplete sentence, which means I would need to underline it. Okay? Okay. So after all that practice, now you're going to put it into work and we have the key question. So for the key question, I'm not going to give you the answers. I'm just going to kind of walk through the questions so that you know what I'm looking for, I guess. Remember for all of these to answer in complete sentences, okay? I am looking for it. It is part of the marks. People can and do lose half their marks if they just write like a one-word answer because this is an English course and I'm wanting you to get the practice. So it's not just about being right, it's about being right and using complete sentences, okay? So number one, explain the difference between the subject and the noun. That's 2 marks. If you're not sure, go back and read some of the material. Number 2, read the sentences below and underline all the nouns. A, the man who cuts the grass is at the house. B, Thunder Bay is a large city with lots of stores and businesses. C, doctors work in hospitals and clinics. Question number 3, read the sentences below and underline the subject in each one. A, moose are best to eat in the fall. B, the truck is going down to the dock. C, I am Dr. Jasek. D, it is Wednesday. E, Steve is the new teacher. Number 4, read the sentences below and underline the verbs or the verb phrases in each one. A, she is running quickly. B, the waves were very large. C, her mother had been baking all day. D, the tree had fallen. And E, the men were building a house. Okay. What are the 3 criteria to make a complete sentence? I have said it over and over again during this video. You can always just back up and you'll find it. Read the sentences below and then circle if they are complete or incomplete. That's just like the support question we did, right? A, Susan, Mary, and I are. B, went fishing every day last week. C, Friday was water day at school. D, all of my friends at home. E, I can't wait to go to the movies. Number 7, all of these sentences are incomplete. First read them and then decide, are they missing the subject or are they missing the verb? Circle which one they're missing. Then fix each sentence by adding the subject or the verb without changing any of the rest of the sentence. Now, if you need to add a subject that it changes the verb a little bit, that's fine. But sometimes people will like completely rewrite it, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to change the sentence as little as possible, but that will still make it a complete sentence, okay? 8, write 5 different simple but complete sentences on the topic of birds. It can be overall topic of birds, or you can write one about an eagle and one about an owl and one about something else, whatever it is, okay? Underline the complete subject in each sentence. Hint, if you keep the sentence short and simple, this is much easier to do. These sentences don't need to be related. They don't need to be in a paragraph format. I'm just asking for simple sentences. Remember to use appropriate capitalization and punctuation. So if there's 10 marks for 5 sentences, what I'm saying is part of your marks are going to capitalizing and punctualizing and also underlining. So I've got here big words here. You must underline the subject to receive the full marks for this question. The reason is I'm trying to tell if you can identify the subject. So it's a pretty critical part of the work. So the first one, my brother loves playing tennis. That's a complete sentence. Sure, but I can't tell if they know what the subject is. So they've lost part of their marks for that. My brother loves playing tennis, and they've underlined my brother. Perfect. They've got full marks for that sentence because they wrote a complete sentence and they could identify the subject within the sentence. Okay? If they hadn't been able to, I would not have given them the full marks. Number 9, write 5 different simple but complete sentences on the topic of pets. These can be in general, or you could be writing about your specific pet, doesn't matter to me. Underline all the verbs, not just the main verb, but all the verbs in each of your sentences. Again, this is much easier to do if you keep the sentences very simple and very short. Also, again, remember to use appropriate capitalization and punctuation. The longer a sentence it is, the more likely there is to have more verbs. It's not an automatic guarantee, but it's easier to miss some if it's a longer sentence. So if I've got Jessie wanted me to come out and play baseball with her. Well, wanted is definitely a verb, but they haven't gotten all the verbs. So first of all, we've got, here we go, to come is another verb. I would take just come if you just said come, I'll take that too. And we've got play, which is a third verb. So for that person's sentence, they would have only got 1/3 of a mark because they missed part of their other verbs. Shorter sentences will often have, although not always have, less verbs. Jack kicked the football. Now, if I had said Jack had kicked the football, I would have to make sure that I had also underlined had to get complete marks. If I didn't, I would lose marks. Okay? So this next question is a reading log, and I want you to be filling out reading logs throughout the rest of this unit. This is one of the government requirements. This isn't my requirement. It's one of the expectations. And it's that idea that you keep a record of the kinds of things you're reading outside of this course. It really can be anything: novels, song lyrics, kids' books, websites, emails, texts, all sorts of things. This log will be handed in at the end of each unit as part one of your, or as one part of your final literacy portfolio. So I'm asking for it as part of each unit because before I was asking for it at the end of the course, and people would do a course for, say, 5 months and then hand me in a page with 5 things. That's not really acceptable. So we're really aiming for more reading than that, okay? Now, you don't have to hand that in with lesson 1, but by the time you finish lesson 5, I would like it to be handed in to me, okay? The intention is that students begin tracking their reading, so I want you to start recording what you read. It doesn't need to be filled out every day. Maybe pick one day a week, Friday or Saturday, to reflect on what you read that week and write it down. Now, if you're a really avid reader, you may not have room to record everything. You can always do some more photocopies. I'm just trying to get you kind of to notice the amount of reading that you do in a day. Now, here's what I sometimes get: but I don't do much reading. Now, a lot of times when people tell me that, it's because they're thinking about books or novels. But there is so much out there to read besides just books. A lot of people do all sorts of reading every day without really noticing. So part of this exercise is helping you to become aware of all the reading you do. So I'm giving you a few suggestions here. I'm going to quickly show you the reading log just so you see it, okay? It's not very much. I'm not looking for a whole lot, but I do want to see some things. So loads of people read social media all day long without realizing that it counts as two. You've got things like Facebook, X, WhatsApp, is that Instagram, Messenger, I think that's Blue Sky. You might have phone messages going on. Now, you don't have to tell me what the conversation was about. You could just say, phone texted my friend, right? That's fine. Okay, hobbies and interests often have reading involved. You might be reading magazines. Maybe you're reading a travel guide because you're planning to go somewhere special. Maybe you're reading cheat codes for a video game you're playing. Maybe you're looking at things like manga or graphic novels. Maybe you're reading comic books or comic strips in a newspaper. Maybe you've got somebody writing letters to you. Maybe you're reading the newspaper. Maybe you're reading blogs about your favorite topics. Sometimes at the doctor's office we end up reading things, right? There might be charts on the wall that we read. There might be brochures that they give us about, oh, you've got high cholesterol. Here's a brochure about high cholesterol. They might give us prescriptions. They might give us information about whatever disease we may have been diagnosed with. They might read us a chart or talk over a test with us. And then at our job, there might be a whole bunch of things. You might have manuals you have to read about new machinery you have to operate. You might be reading your contract. You might be reading or writing a resume. You might be reading job ads. Maybe you've got to do a survey at work. Maybe there's bulletin boards or memos you have to read. Maybe you've got files or reports you have to read. So there's all sorts of work you might do, all sorts of reading you might be doing at your job. That stuff counts too. Legal stuff. There's all sorts of sort of legal documents just involved that we read or that we have to fill out applications for, like your driver's license, a will, health insurance, birth certificates, visas, work permits, any kind of like legal document, right? And then if you've got children, you might have a lot of stuff coming from the school. Maybe you've got homework that you're reading or helping with. Maybe you've got report cards. Maybe you've got fundraising things that you need to read over, or classroom rules, or projects you're helping a kid with. Or maybe you have books you're reading with your kids, or a newsletter from the teacher's classroom. All those kind of things would count. So here's a quick picture of me filling in part of this chart. You put the date, tell me what kind of text. Here I've got magazines, websites, recipes. The text can be title or author. Sometimes you have both, sometimes you don't, right? Vogue, John Smith, Betty Crocker, Miss Johnson, Ford. Tell me the length of time or the pages read. Sometimes it's easier to say, well, I read 5 pages. Sometimes it's easier to say, well, I read for 20 minutes. And then you can tell me the main idea or comment. If you had like a really personal conversation with your friend, you don't have to tell me, well, we were discussing, whether she should leave her boyfriend or not. You could just say, having a relationship discussion, right? I don't need to know all the details. It's just the idea that you kind of are reporting a little bit on what you read, okay? So that is the end of class for today. This is the class that we'll be posting tomorrow. Obviously, I am doing it ahead of time, so tomorrow's class I won't be able to have anybody live. Sorry. I will be back in town on Friday, so if you're trying to reach me tomorrow, unfortunately I'll be traveling and won't be able to talk, but I will be back on Friday if you want to have any kind of conversation with me. Have a good night, and I will talk to everybody later.